Hello and welcome to this webinar on the best practices for using MyAccountingLab to achieve measurable learning outcomes. My name is Michael Porteous. I'm the Product Manager for Learning Technologies in Higher Education at Pearson, Australia. I've left everyone on mute for the time being so I can get through these 10 important points quickly and clearly, but I appreciate that along the way you're going to have questions. So to help with this, we'll have a Q&A session at the end of the webinar, but along the way you can ask questions into the webinar system as is shown up there at the moment. So I'll get through as many questions as I can at the end or follow up with answers afterwards. So, what does Pearson mean by best practice in regards to the MyLabs? What sources do we get information from and how do we formulate best practice? So we define it as the theory and practice of implementing a MyLab into your teaching based on successful usage of our other MyLabs around the world combined with proven educational research. So we've been on a journey of proving the efficacy of our products for a number of years now, which has given us a large library of evidence on the effectiveness of our MyLabs, and most importantly, how they were used to achieve these results. So this webinar will focus on these overarching 10 points that have been very successful, but we're looking at how this applies in particular with MyAccountingLab and accounting units. So let's get started on the first point of learning we've found. This is identify the problems you want to solve. Now, this might seem obvious, but without a goal, there's nothing to plan for. Goals define your implementation and give you something to measure, which is vital as the endpoint is just as important as the journey. So what is your current goal? What are the difficulties you have in your teaching right now? Think about this and really come up with some clear ideas about what you're actually trying to achieve. What are the things that you need to measure to actually prove that your change is going to be successful? So in the meantime, here are some very common goals we see in Australia in higher education and accounting subjects in particular. Faster student development, getting them to that point of learning quicker. Creation of online or blended course options I know is a massive push in many universities. I think everybody wants increased student success rates, obviously, but some units might require them more than others. Better teaching with fewer resources. Often departments will simply have less resources, less rooms, less teachers and so forth. So being able to make teaching more efficient and better with less resources is very, very critical. Reduction in cost per student expenses. Improved retention rates is something we hear very often. And in general, reducing administration, a better usability experience, and greater efficiency with your teaching. So these are some of the points that we come across very often. So the second point is choosing the method of delivery for your goals. So once you have your goals that you need to be met, you need to choose a way that you deliver that. And this can be based on the needs of your students, your teaching staff, and it's also based on the capabilities and your restrictions. Everyone's going to have different circumstances, so there's no single cookie-cutter solution with so many variables. But we can offer a few examples that we've seen worked well that might give you some ideas. So the most traditional way of looking at putting MyAccountingLab into your teaching sort of fits in with the more traditional system of student preparation, giving them some idea of what's coming up, the face-to-face teaching in your lectures, the content delivery there and tutorials as well, and then student follow-up and study, which you expect them to do in their own time. So within this system, you can add in activities that support these stages using assessment and personalised learning in MyAccountingLab. So you could use assessments before that face-to-face teaching to either check their understanding or prepare them for that content delivery when they arrive, so they're getting more out of it. You can also, during lectures, some of our newer MyAccountingLabs, such as Actual Accounting, for instance, comes with a bring-your-own-device classroom engagement and assessment system called Learning Catalytics, and this can enhance that lecture or tutorial teaching space as well. And then afterwards, students can receive follow-up tests, and they can also complete the personalised study plans in MyAccountingLab to make sure they're guided to the concepts they least understand, building the mastery of their learning before they start again and move back onto the next topic. So this model is probably the easiest to introduce, as you don't need to change your general teaching patterns, but it would need to replace many of the traditional assessments that you already do. But it also helps to promote more prepared students, more engaged students, and deliver better results due to that personalised remediation. This is a system we call disaggregating your course. So This style of implementation is more about giving the power to your tutors or teaching aides or cross-campus colleagues and so forth to make the most use, especially in tutorial-style classes or lab-style classes. So what you do is you create a master course as the controller of this unit, and then you make copies for every tutorial or subgroup or courses in distance campuses, and this all mirrors your master course. Any changes that you make in that master course are then filtered down to these smaller ones. So the idea of this is to empower that face-to-face teacher with good analytics of the individual students in their classroom. You can also use it to create competition between groups if you choose, and also easily assess the teaching of your staff by seeing which groups are doing better than others. So each teacher would have full access to their smaller group of students and the analytics they deliver rather than one big classroom. This allows them to actually personalise their face-to-face teaching by understanding what their students might be struggling with rather than going by a set script. So it's much more about empowering that face-to-face teaching moment. And combining this with the personalised features in MyAccountingLab, this enhances that further. So the flip model is something that shows a lot of potential for many courses. Not every course, obviously. We know some people will not be able to use this sort of model, and it is being talked about a lot. But MyAccountingLab is a really good technology to support this if it fits in with your style of teaching. So in the flip model, the students are given content before face-to-face class time to help them prepare, rather than having it delivered to them within the lectures and tutorials. So using assessment for learning as well as your own unique content, you can deliver to the students with MyAccountingLab to give information and also test their basic knowledge so that they're prepared when they come to face-to-face class teaching. Then during class, you can use your own examples and so forth, or you could use learning catalytics, which will be available in all of our accounting books very soon, in lectures and tutorials to show them the application of knowledge. And then afterwards, you make sure they complete the study plan to fill in the gaps of knowledge to help them push them forward and extend their understanding and make sure they've got that mastery of that module before they move along. Now this is also going to be alongside any intervention or extension strategies you have separate from the MyLab as well. So this is all designed to push students up from the most basic part of Bloom's taxonomy further up that pyramid to greater understanding and critical thinking through a very sort of organised process that's supported along the way by MyAccountingLab. So I hope that gives you a few ideas of what's working currently, showing best practice can be used in a few different ways. But all of these are supported by the following points and why these models might work. So the third point is building an assessment plan. Now this might sound familiar to what we just talked about, but this is about the nitty-gritty aspects of how you do it, not just the theory on how you'll achieve your goals. So here are some of the essential questions to ask at this stage. Who is responsible for what part of the process? Getting that clear is very important to the whole plan. You need to work out what needs to be assessed, when and how, which is something you probably have a pretty good idea of, but it's good to revisit that. You also need what settings and what content are needed in MyAccountingLab to help drive this, so identifying those sorts of things within the lab. Then also what content needs to be created or modified. If there's things that you need to add that's very personal to your course, they can be put into MyAccountingLab through the customization process, but making sure that you're pinpointing that so you're not left dry and making it fit into that assessment plan properly. And also, how does this tie into other activities and learning goals and accreditation and so forth? So making sure that this is all mapped very, very carefully. And the good thing about this is that MyAccountingLab ties into this very well. There's a lot of help that you can receive through that, but only you can answer those individual questions. So a few ways to help here is, first of all, within the lab, you can create homeworks or quizzes or tests. Basically, homeworks are assessment for learning, so formative assessment where students will get help and remediation and feedback, whereas a quiz or a test is much more an assessment tool. So you're seeing what they know, you're not giving them the help along the way. It's much more about testing them than actually giving them some help and advice. And both of those things are important at different parts of your plan. Then you go into the content that we actually have. So everything's broken down by chapter of the book, sections within the book. You can pull questions for other books even as well. You can show publisher questions, which are test bank questions and which are more full tutorial style questions, your own custom questions. Everything's customizable in here. So you can very quickly go through, you can click on one of these blue links which will simply bring up the question. You can see that as the completed section or work it through as a student. You can copy and edit and so forth, and you can see everything that the student would see. So very quickly you can find out what our system has, what content it has, does it map to what you need to teach, and then you can be able to use that to build that assessment plan. And then you can also choose how you deliver it. So there's obviously the more simple things of when it's available, when it's due, and so forth. But you can also control what happens with late submissions, whether you give partial credit for getting some parts of questions right, whether you have prerequisites. So you're going to put this in a mode where they have to complete one assignment before they move on to the other, whether it's open slather, they can choose to do it whenever they want. You can give them numbers of attempts per question. There is a huge amount of flexibility in how you want to design the way that you're assessing based upon your individual needs. So all that is available through MyAccountingLab. Step 4, get and keep everyone on the same page. So collaboration and communication is key to successful deployment of a new technology and teaching plan. Again, this might seem obvious, but it's amazing how quickly communications can break down. So, I mean, you might be working in a teaching team, or you might be going solo. You might be working with faculty redesign. You might have a team of tutors. You know, everybody here needs to be in the loop and understand the plans and goals, so everyone can add into that process, no matter how small their role is. So we recommend that initially, everyone is brought in to understand the goals of the implementation, and then continue with short, regular meetings, especially on that initial implementation with key stakeholders. Now, I also highly recommend including Pearson in your planning and meetings as well. We have a learning technology team that can be on campus or attend by phone or WebEx to check in and offer some personalised advice and support with MyAccountingLab teaching practice. It's in our best interest to make sure this works well for you, so we're really keen to help you with that. These meetings give you a chance to keep to the plan, make adjustments, look into the data, and make sure that everything is driving towards that end goal. And this is a point, obviously, we're putting in because when this hasn't happened, we've seen things not work well. So this is based on our faculty advisors saying that this is a key part of making things work. That being said, they also recommend start small. The most successful implementations enable both the students and the faculty to ease into a new format. So in this way, initial problems get worked out on a small scale before expanding to the entire course, across all sections, or throughout the department. So we recommend to consider one of the following approaches. Have a pilot implementation. Perhaps you have a summer course you can trial it in, or you have a section of students that you could trial this in first. Some way that you can just get a small section to get some feedback, work out the kinks before you go forward. We also believe in progressive implementation. So only start with using certain aspects of MyAccountingLab, and when you're comfortable, slowly add more features. And that depends on your comfort level as well with the technology and other parts of your teaching. And then slowly integrate it. So start with required homework is the most important thing that we say. But when you're ready, start looking into the diagnostics and the data, or adding different learning techniques and so on. So making sure that at each stage, each semester, that you're adding a little bit more in as you go, so that you're assessing and you're not adding too many variables into the equation before you're comfortable with it. Position students for success. So when you think about what success is, it's best to look at what the student experience and design ways to make sure they are positioned for the most success in your unit using MyAccountingLab. So we asked our faculty advisors about some of the most effective methods seen to improve student outcomes from their own teaching or other academics units they've been involved with. And here are some of the most common pathways to supporting students to get the most out of your system. Make it easy to use. I think everyone can agree that this is really important. The first barrier is always usability. If students find it too hard to start with, they'll disengage, they'll complain. MyAccountingLab makes this less of an issue since we can integrate into all of the major learning management systems with a simple single sign-on system. So there's a way that we can easily get them from your systems to our systems without any hassle. So that just makes it really simple for them to use when they're already trying to work out the LMS and so on. We also strongly believe that an orientation session of some sort is really important. Any new technology can seem daunting until you understand it. So when you have a lecture or tutorials or some other way, it's best to have some sort of orientation session to help the student acclimatise to MyAccountingLab and see how it will work in your subject. It's really important to set the expectations from the very beginning. Provide structure and rules. Students, especially in that first year, require a lot of guidance. And often they see assessments as something they need to game and require the rules of this game. So when you control those rules, you can make sure that that learning process is not trivialized to the point of a game, though. So making sure that you clearly outline the process and the rules of the assessments and the way the MyLab works is essential. So they'll feel more comfortable, you'll have more control, and you'll definitely get less students knocking on your door asking for extensions and so forth. Require participation in the process. Time and again, we see really good resources not even touched by students because there's no incentive for them to go in and use them. They don't understand the learning they can get from MyAccountingLab to begin with. So if they don't have some way of being incentivized, we see typically 10 to 20% of students actually engaging in the process. So that's why we really recommend making sure the MyAccountingLab is attached to some level of grades or as a hurdle obstacle they have to complete before they move on and progress. There's got to be something that incentivizes them to actually do it, or they won't getting the most out of the system and it will not build with your assessment plan and so forth. Mastery learning. So this is something that's come through loud and clear from our faculty advisors. A clear indication of success was using Mastery Learning. With Mastery Learning, you make sure that every student has mastered a topic to a certain degree before they can pass or move on. Now, this can be done in many ways, but the self-paced and personalised aspect of the MyAccountingLab study plan can help you achieve this. It's really easy to pull reports on this, and you can set the mastery level at whatever percent you like. The default, I think, is 80%, but you can set that up or down depending on how harshly you want to make sure that they're getting that mastery. And then you can select what topics they need to actually master to. So you can use the study plan as a way of employing mastering and learning. Connect and engage with students. Students who feel connected to the course and the content are much more engaged and have better results. The feeling of being disassociated from the process and system is especially bad in first year large classes. There's also a level of shyness and embarrassment when trying to interact with young adults in particular in a class environment, and that makes even more of a barrier. So MyAccountingLab can help in this regard in a few different ways. Learning Catalytics I'll mention once again. At the moment it's only available with the actual accounting title coming out next year, but soon all of our MyAccountingLabs will have this integrated within the system. The good thing about this is it's an excellent way to engage with students in a classroom setting that allows you to ask them questions, get feedback and so forth, but it also allows anonymous interactions. Well, it's anonymous to their peers, you can see what they do. But it's a way for them to ask questions and say they don't know without having the embarrassments of putting up their hands. It provides engaging experiences through different types of formats of questions rather than just the typical multiple choice. So students who engage with active learning and peer learning, which it provides, are obviously going to be more connected and engaged with the process rather than just sitting there and listening to the content delivered to them. Also, knowing your students' minds. So when you engage with the students, when you ask them questions, you can find out what they think, and they can also tell you what they think directly through the system. So you can really understand where they're at rather than taking a guess at what they're understanding and what they're not. So understanding that when you actually come out and say, I know you guys are not quite getting this, let's revise, they're going to think, wow, you actually understand where they're at, and that's going to bring that engagement to the fore. Also, the gradebook is a really important tool. So it's not just where we track their grades and so forth. You can see very quickly which students are not active by inactivity alerts, and also going through and seeing if they're not doing well in their assignments on a student-by-student basis and so forth. So you can very quickly see who is struggling, and then you can immediately send them an email from the system. So you can find who's inactive, who's doing poorly, and you can immediately email them with a, hey, do you need any help? Is something wrong? Or you can get a tutor to do that, or other teaching aids, or however you want to run it. But there's an easy way to find that and very quickly make contact. And that could stop half a dozen students from perhaps dropping out if they're having troubles. So along with this, here's a few tips that our faculty advisors have given us. I think I mentioned this before, offer points for everything. They feel engaged when they're building upon something, they're getting points for things. It's kind of a gaming of the system, but if it enhances their learning, it definitely works. Offer self-acceleration options. Have students respond to each other and share ideas. Now, you might do this on forums in your LMS, but we also have forums and discussion boards within MyAccountingLab as well. And also get information to them as early as possible. This came through as a very important tip that really helped keep students engaged. Step 8, getting close to the end, employ personalised and adaptive learning. So across disciplines for all academic skill levels, the most successful teaching and learning solutions include personalisation and adaptive learning technology that provide immediate feedback and enhance and inform assessment. Now this is something that MyAccountingLab really excels at. So the study plan is a system of personalised learning that builds an individual pathway for each student they need to progress through till they've mastered the course. Now, this is initially populated by diagnostic tests, but also by the results through assignments. So when they get things wrong, the study plan knows they need to study that. So that every student is going to have a very different experience based on what they know and what they don't know to help them all build a unique pathway. As you can see here, they can practice as often as they want before they go on and actually quiz and say that they've mastered it. So the idea is that power of practice, they continually keep going. So within the questions themselves, though, there's a lot of really interesting things that can help. They get, I'll go back here, they get a help me solve this button. And this is another aspect of personalised learning where they can go in and they get a walkthrough of that question. They get a walkthrough to show the process of understanding how to answer it. And this is really important. It's something that you might take them through as a tutor, as a lecturer, to go through and actually show them, the steps they need to take. And then it resets the numbers afterwards to different ones. So they get constantly getting different questions. And they're also going to get wrong answer feedback. If they get something wrong, the system's going to give them a hint. It's going to tell them, this is what you might want to consider. Now, this is available in all the study plan practices and any assignments that you set as a homework, but obviously not as the assessments that will just be checking their understanding. Now, some of our accounting titles, such as Holmgren Accounting, are also powered by an adaptive learning technology that changes the study plan from a linear progression where they tick off the boxes they don't know into something that's much more dynamic and adapts to the students as they work on the study plan. This is powered by a technology called Newton, and what it does is it has an internal map of all the concepts that are interlinked in accounting, and it won't just take them in one direction. It will actually take them back to previous knowledge that they seem to be struggling with now, and it also might push them forward to new sections where appropriate. In this way, the system is continually responding to the student's input and understanding, and never rests until the student truly masters each concept and each underlying concept. And as you can see here in this sort of example map, each student's going to have a very different pathway to get to their solution, and that provides the ultimate in that personalisation of learning. Now, number 9 is conducting frequent assessments. So educators have long recognised the necessity of assessment as both a measurement of how well students are learning and as a tool for critical feedback. So the reasons why I recommend assessments are regular, such as a weekly or maybe fortnightly, is it keeps students on top of their coursework. Now, they actually really appreciate it. I've personally seen students' responses to our surveys, and every single time when they say, how do you enjoy the pace of the course? Most of the time, I would say 80% of the time, they say, I really liked being kept on top of my coursework. If I wasn't pushed to do this, I wouldn't have achieved the outcomes that I've got at the end. So while they might hate doing weekly coursework, as long as it's in small packages, they actually really like the fact that they're kept on top of their coursework and they don't fall behind, which is often, happens all too often. And also, your data gets more granular when you have lots of different little assignments divided into chunks. So you can look at different insights through the data of the MyLab as well. And I think importantly, you get earlier feedback on their performance. So you can action things before they become problems. So rather than just a mid-semester test, if you've got some feedback in week 2 or 3 and you're seeing the students are struggling or individuals are struggling, you can action that long before they drop out or drag everybody else down. So 10, track learning gains. So what you don't track, you can't measure, and what you haven't measured, you can't prove that has happened. So using data to track learning is essential to proving the success of using MyAccountingLab in your unit. Luckily, the MyLab makes this really easy to do. So what you want to be looking for is any data that supports the completion of those original goals that you set out and the strategy that you had without drowning in numbers. And this will prove to yourself and to your school or faculty that your students are learning more, that your teaching strategy is sound, and offers you a lot of hints on places you can work to improve as well, because there's always more to learn. So MyAccountingLab helps in a bunch of different ways. We've obviously got our gradebook, and this shows you students' marks. You can compare that to their final marks, how they're doing, importance of having absolute critical visibility into how your students are doing, as an overview or down to each individual assignment is what you get in the gradebook. Every time the student submits something, pretty much every button click they do is tracked, and you can find out about that information. You can also compare classes or tutorial groups very easily, see who's doing well, who's not. You can see how long students are spending on assignments, and compared to their scores, as sort of a assignment by assignment view, for instance, here, where you can see they've spent a certain amount of minutes and got certain average results. Or you can break it down by the students themselves and see where they fit. Are they completing assignments way too fast for their actual, end mark, or are they spending a lot of time and still not getting good results, which might indicate that they really need some extra help? Or maybe spending a lot of time and getting very well, which means they're just engaged with the process. And you can then break that down student by student, cohort by cohort, and really get an understanding of where your students are at. Now, all this data can be used in different ways, tied into the data you're getting from their actual exams and completion rates. So that was a bit of a crash course, I guess, in the 10 best practices we have, but I hope that these high-level ideas of creating better outcomes, combined with some of the more detailed looks into MyAccountingLab, has given you some ideas, some thoughts that you might be able to use. You also might be thinking, wow, that's a lot to consider and a lot to do, and I'm already really busy. So we really understand that change can be very, very hard, and we really want to support you in that change as well. So it's in our best interest to make sure that we are supporting you and getting the most out of this system. So we have field-based consultants and learning technology managers who can work with you on campus, I think I mentioned before, so they can be in there, talk to you, talk to your teaching teams and so forth, and make sure that you're getting the most advice and support that we can do. We also have an office-based customer experience team who deliver personalised training, pedagogical help and implementation, especially that after-sales support piece, and they're really keen to have multiple touch points with you along the semester to help you achieve the maximum result you can. We also have IT specialists who work with your IT teams as well to achieve that LMS integration I mentioned before, to make sure students can very easily swap between systems without any sort of problem. And there's a few different levels of that, but they are the experts who can deal with your IT experts and get that running smoothly. We also have a dedicated team of local technical support. So during business hours, you can call up, your students can call up. If you're having a technical issue, they can solve that for you on the spot. And outside of business hours, we have a 24/7 website which students and academics can go to get help. So at all points, at all aspects, from technical to pedagogical, we're there to support you along the way, and that's something that we feel very, very strongly about. Okay, I'm going to open this up to any questions people might have. So if you have a question, then you can either type that into the question field, or I think you can raise your hand in the webinar system, and I can unmute you and let you talk through that question. So I'll wait a moment to see if anyone has a question. And if not, we'll move on to the end. So I'll just give you a moment. Okay, you all must seem very convinced of what I said. So I don't think there's any questions at the moment, but that's fine. If you do have anything that you think of later, please send an email to marketing@pearson.com.au. and we can make sure that answer gets addressed, and we put it up on an FAQ later along with the recording of this webinar. So you will receive a follow-up email with the recording if you want to share that with your colleagues or review this again. And any further information or any other literature we have, I'll also include on that page as well. So thank you very much for attending today. I hope you have a great day. I hope this helped, and good luck with the rest of the semester. Thank you.